It's finally that time. We're gonna work on Fernando's car today. That's right, the second installment of Car Stereo Lab, Fernando's car, starts today. What are we doing? Well, we're gonna go ahead and add in those audio control amplifiers to the car. We already put the Phoenix Gold in. If you guys didn't see part 1 of that, go ahead and go back and watch that. Pause, stop this, go watch that, and then you'll know what's going on. So what we got going on in this, we have a front amplifier, we have a sub amplifier. We're gonna make the whole lab portion of the board. And what I mean by that is this, hold on. So we went ahead and already cut this out here. This is gonna sit in the floor like this. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach a whole bunch of serviceable pieces. Basically these things. We're gonna attach a bunch of this stuff to it. What it's gonna allow us to do is have a work area. So there'll be a power side and there'll be a signal side. And then what we can do is we can switch out products as need be. DSP, amplifiers, whatever we want. We're gonna keep the factory radio in this for right now so that we'll have the ability to do all the cool high level to low level features that are built into a lot of these amplifiers. So that's the plan. What we wanna do today is we're gonna get the board made up. We're gonna get those amplifiers in. We're going to talk a little bit about those amplifiers, what makes those amplifiers cool. You think anything else, Fernando?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
All right. So he's getting the car seat out of the car right now and all the other stuff that was in the trunk in our way.
Clean your cars, people. Come on.
Yeah, what the heck? Why are you bringing it in to have us work on it? It's all messy. Jesus, shame on you. So that's what's going on. Let's get started. So thank God for Amazon. They still actually sell things like barrier strips and stuff like that, because really anymore it's hard to find these things. But what we have is we have an 8 barrier strip and we have a 4 barrier strip, and then of course they came in big sets of each, and we're going to use them to do different things. And then we found a Car AV Nissan harness so that we can plug this in and make a T harness to go into the radio. We're also going to use the Stinger 9 conductor speed wire that's going to allow us to run these wires to the back of the car and to the front. It's going to go back anyways. So that's this guy here. So we have all this stuff we have to get into the car. So when we did the first part, we put the speakers in and you guys were like, you know, you're gonna do a DSP test, how come you're not going active? And it's like, well, for this test we're not needing active, we just need a front, left, and right. That doesn't mean we're not going to prepare for that. We're also not hooking up rear speakers in this situation, but that doesn't mean we're not going to wire up 4 rear speakers. We're going to run the speed wire to the front from the amplifier. So this is going to be our signal coming in to go to the speakers. We're going to use all 8 of those wires for front. We're going to run a second set of wires to where the rear speakers are. They're not going to be using the speed wire, so that we'll have 8 speaker wires up front. So when we need to do active, the wires will be there. We can run them into the door. So if we ever decide to, let's say, pull these Phoenix Gold out and put another brand of speaker in there, and we are going to go active because let's say we have another amplifier that we want to use, all the wiring is going to be in the car for those lab tests when we're ready for it. This particular lab test didn't need that. That doesn't mean the next one won't. So we're going to run as much stuff forward now so we don't ever have to take the car again and run new wiring. We're also going to run an accessory, a constant, a ground, remote, all the wires to the back that we might need going forward for anything that might be in the trunk. Alright, so now what we need to do is figure out how many of these terminals we need. So we know we're going to need 4 and 4, which is 8 wires for the front at some point. So that's going to be a full 8. We know we have 8 coming from the radio, so that'll be another full 8. We know we have, and by 8 I mean we're going to have front tweeter, front mid, front tweeter, front mid, so that's 4 there. And then 8 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, which is, you know, driver's front, passenger front, driver's rear, passenger rear. And then we're going to need rear wires that we're going to just run to have, so that's going to be a 4 block. And then we also want to have another block that has power, accessory, ground, and remote, so that's another 4 block. So we're going to need 2 8 blocks and 2 4 blocks. So for power, we're going to be going with the SPD 570 power distribution block. Now what makes this distribution block pretty cool is that there's a 12 volt power side and a 12 volt ground side. Nice piece of plastic between the two. We're going to go ahead and run a 4 gauge into this so that we'll have that all back here, power and ground. We can hook up either 4 gauge into this or 2 8 gauge into it. So it'll allow us to do pretty much any amplifier we want in the lab. Now what we need to do is go ahead and take these into the car and figure out where these are gonna get mounted, where the holes are gonna be for the wire, and then we'll go ahead and start wiring this thing up. This is where the test board is going to live. We're gonna have the signal on this side, we're gonna have the power wire on this side. And the reason why we're gonna do that is because the battery is on the passenger side of his car. Battery sits right here. If you guys have ever seen us do one of these, a 350Z or a G35, underneath this area right here is a giant grommet that the power wire comes through to attach to the battery. We'll of course show that in a little bit once we get this all apart. So not wanting to go too elaborate, because this is all about function, not about how pretty it is. We have to be able to do things with it. We're gonna go ahead and go for a real basic look here. Keep these off to the sides as much as possible so we have as much room here in the center. We're gonna do the same on this side. Because this is raised up off the floor, we are going to drill the wires down and have them go up into this area here. So let's take over the bench and start getting these things mounted and the wires in place. So to wire these up, we're gonna go ahead and wire them up in our order, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is driver's front, passenger front, driver's rear, passenger rear. This has the extra blue wire on it that would normally be the remote turn on. We're not gonna need that, so we're just gonna go ahead and cut it off. And then we're just going to line these up and we'll go positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. Now, you can go ahead and put fork terminals if you want on these. I'm not going to. I'm just gonna tin the ends and then screw them down. That way I don't have to worry about a fork terminal or anything like that that might come loose. It's gonna be wire right underneath the clip. We've gone ahead and made sure that we put all the stripe wires up so that you can see the stripe. So at quick glance, you know, if you're like, hey, wait a minute, no, they're all, so it's solid stripe, solid stripe, solid stripe. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the same on this one here. Now I almost forgot, we do need to add one more of these for rear speakers. So we'll go ahead and add that barrier strip up here. Now, so that we can differentiate between what our signal wire is and what our speaker wire is gonna be, we're gonna go ahead and put some flexible loom over it. For the output side, meaning the wires that are gonna run up front to power the speakers, we're gonna wire them up a little differently. Instead of going white, gray, green, purple, we're gonna go white, green, gray, purple. And the reason for that is the whites and the greens are both driver's side and the gray and the purple are both passenger side. And eventually, if we need to, we're gonna use the greens for the tweeters and the purples for the tweeters on their corresponding sides. So now we have the output wired up. We have, like I said, white, green, gray, purple. Now, we are gonna put little stickers here that describe what they are, so that's okay, don't worry about that. We'll have a signal, a speaker, and then a rear here. So let's go ahead and do the last, which is getting the rear wire in place. For the rear, we have some white and gray speaker wire that we like to use. We're gonna go ahead and just run 2 of those, one white for the driver's side, one gray for the passenger side. The rear is in. There again, positive, negative, positive, negative. So that's the flow along all these. That's the thing, you wanna make sure you stay consistent when you're building something like this. So now we wanna go ahead and get to the power on this side. We're gonna run a red, a black, a yellow, and a blue. All right, so we have our 4 wires. Let's go ahead and get them wired up.
So I just finished the battery. So this is the grommet that we're going through right here. I use the flex loom, and this one, I like the red one, so there we go.
So the amp board is finished, except for the stickers. It never fails. As soon as you need to print a sticker, you run out of stuff. So we were able to get one sticker on, that's it. So we'll have to finish that at a later date. But let's get to the purpose of this. The whole reason why the lab exists is to test amplifiers. We have 2 amplifiers here that we want to talk about. So it's no secret, there's less and less room in cars to hide things, like in this case an amplifier. So big amplifiers, you don't always have room for those. Sometimes you need a small footprint amplifier. AudioControls has come out with 3 amplifiers using the same size chassis, and they're all 300 watts, and each one of them does a little bit different. In this case we have a 1x300, they also have a 2x300, and they're also coming out with a 4x300. With the 4x300 and the 1x300, or this case the 2x300 and the 1x, there's a lot of combinations is what I'm getting at. But let's open these things up and we'll talk about some of the neat things that you can do with these amplifiers. Now when you first open the amplifier, you're going to find an owner's manual. Read it. AudioControl writes these owner's manuals to be read, okay? Unlike most manufacturers that just kind of put some gibberish on here, no, they actually take the time to write a real owner's manual. So read it. The amplifier itself, as we said, is of a small stature. It measures 9 1/4 out to the edge here and 3 inches that way. Alright, now that you have the cover off the amplifier, make sure you go ahead and put the screws in so you don't lose them. Anytime you're doing an amplifier that has screws like this, just screw them in so that you don't. Now, the nice thing about this cover plate is that it comes like this, but you can do this. So depending on how you're going to mount this, you can at least have the cover plate match the direction of the amplifier. Now, because this side of the amplifier is flat, you could take multiple versions of this and stack them next to one another. They are going to be coming out with plates, bigger, that you can add to the top of them so it looks like one big amplifier. Let's go ahead and turn this on the side like this. Let's take a look at what we have here. These are removable. So this is the speaker output plug. Now this is a mono amplifier, but if you'll notice it has 2 positives and 2 negatives. That's just to make your life a little bit easier when you're going to install it. They're internally connected, and how we can test that is we can go ahead and take our digital multimeter, set its continuity. That's when you do this. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put it in the grounds. We'll go ahead and put it in the powers. Now the reason why they do this is so if you're putting this on, let's say, an enclosure that has 2 speaker cups, a right and a left, you can run a wire off to each. That way you don't have to cram wires into one connector. Or if you wanted to run a wire to each voice coil of a dual voice coil woofer, it allows you to do that. Next to that is we're going to have the RCA inputs. You have 2. A left and a right. Now, like we said, it's a mono amplifier, so it's just going to sum them into one channel. Then you have this guy here. This is also a plug. This is your high level input. So this has high level and low level input. After all, AudioControl is known for their high level to low level adapters. In this case, this has the LC2I built into it, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Power connection over here. As you can see, it's a pretty good size, so this will take up to a 4 gauge. It does have a 30 amp fuse. Now looking at the top of the amplifier, it has AudioControl's patented GTO circuit, which is a signal sense turn on. What that allows it to do is when you hook up high level, it'll automatically detect that signal coming in and create a remote turn on. So if you're hooking it up high level, you don't have to go get a remote turn on. It'll generate it for you. It has AccuBase. This is where that LC2I comes in. These are all the features built into an LC2I. If you compare this to an LC2I, it's only a little bit bigger, and this has a 300 watt amp built into it. So you have your threshold level for AccuBase. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what AccuBase is designed to help cars that have bass roll-off. Bass roll-off is an effect that when you're turning up the volume, the bass starts to drop off or flatten out, whereas the highs keep going. What AccuBase will do is allow you to dial into that and then keep the bass going up in parallel with the highs. It's a really cool feature. Now, if your car doesn't have bass roll off, you can use this as a bass boost. You have your low pass crossover. This has 80 or 120 hertz low pass crossover. It has your gain control and it has maximize. Maximize is their distortion detector built into the amplifier. So as you're setting up the amplifier, as the light comes on, you know that you're set and ready to go on your gain. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 2-channel. Now if you compare the 1.300 to the 2.300, in form factor, they're almost identical, with the exception of, obviously, AccuBase. This one doesn't have AccuBase. And this is what I was talking about when I said you could make them into one amplifier. You could easily set them just like this, put your cover plates on, and they both go the same direction. Now looking at the 2.300, we have that same removable plug here. You can bridge it if you want to, for some reason, if you feel you need to. This is a bridgeable amplifier. You have your same line level input here, as well as the same high level input. It's the same power input. It'll take the 4 gauge or the 8 gauge, and it's a 30 amp fuse. Now the one thing I didn't mention on this guy here is the power and the protect light. Power light is green and the protect light is red. Obviously these amplifiers all have some form of protection built into them. Now if the protect LED comes on, it's gonna flash. You're gonna wanna count what those flashes are doing. The reason why is because if you turn to the last page of the owner's manual, it's gonna go ahead and tell you what's wrong with the amplifier. It's capable of diagnosing itself to find out what's going on. So flash, 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 turn on delay, short protection, DC output protection, transformer over temp, heatsink over temp, over voltage or under voltage. So the amplifier will tell you what's going on with it. It has the GTO, signal sense turn on. It has a high pass crossover of 80 hertz or 120, the gain, and there again the maximize light to make sure that it's set for optimum output. So that's a brief overview of what these amplifiers will do for you. In this case, it's the size. These things are tiny. Here's my iPhone 7 Plus. The amplifier is only about 2.5 inches longer than my phone. They're very thin. I didn't give you that measurement. They're 1 5/8 deep. You could use these for a lot of applications. They're thin. You get the idea. One of the reasons why we would put these in, let's say, this G35 is that we could hide them anywhere. Up on the back package tray, in one of the side panels. We could even take out in the back where the factory Bose amplifier was, we could take that out and we could stack 2 of these up underneath there and they'd be out of the way. So there's a lot of applications for these small footprint amplifiers. Let's go ahead and grab the amp board, set these down, get them screwed in, and let's get them into the car. All right, so now that we have them on the board, trying to figure out which way we want to do them. Originally, I was thinking something like this or something like this. But I gotta be honest with you, after looking at this back piece right here, they need to go right here. This is perfect. This is so tucked up out of the way. All right, let's get these things screwed down and into place. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put this on 80 and 80. We'll go ahead and turn the GTO on both of the amplifiers. Turn our gains down. All right, let's get some wires hooked up to these bad boys. The amp lab board is all set and ready to go. Now the idea, as we said, we'll be able to switch out amplifiers very easily. We went ahead and made these runs and covered them up, put ferrules on the ends so we can pull these out or make new ones if we need to. Plus it looks nice too, so when it's just in the trunk chilling out, these things won't be all just ugly and whatnot, because even though this is not a permanent thing, we don't want it to look bad, right?
Exactly.
All right, let's go ahead and run these wires to the front and get this thing in. So the lab is all installed now and ready to go. So the last piece of the equation is this guy right here. This is the Rca Bluetooth T-harness. Now the first thing we want to do is go ahead and cut off these guys here because we're not going to need them. This is car side and this is radio side. We're going to be using the radio side. We're not going to be using the car side because we're going to be running our own wires to them. We'll go ahead and cap these off so that if we need them for anything at any point, we can just go in and quickly get to them. The other side of the harness, what we need to do is go ahead and solder these wires together. These are the power, ground, accessory, and illumination. And then we're going to go ahead and get these outputs all ready too. And of course, we're gonna add in our power, ground, and accessory and remote to run back to those in the back. So the harness is all set. We have the signal that's coming out of the radio, both front and rear. We have the front speakers. We have our power accessory ground, all the power side on this end. Everything is ready to get soldered into the car as soon as we get the wires up behind the radio. All right, so we've managed to get all our wiring to the front. Now we have a couple feet extra of this we need to cut off and solder in our harness. Alright, all the wires are soldered in place. The last thing we have to do is hook up our ground wire. Typically, these Nissans, the Infinitis, they all use a chassis ground, meaning when you screw them in, it completes the ground circuit. We've talked about these cars before. We always say run a ground wire. So the last thing Fernando's doing is putting it in our ground wire that's going to run to the back for our panel. Then we can go ahead and get this radio in. Now, the one thing about the G35 is that the radio goes in first, and then every other panel in the car sits on top of it. So we can't put any of the car back together until we get this in. So we're going to go ahead and get this in. We'll turn it on and make sure it works, get it all back together, and then we'll start our testing.
Alright, nothing more.
That's cool. A little bit of an update. We had to pull the radio back out because even though the car AV harness looked identical to a 7550 harness that we thought it was totally pinned wrong. I didn't check it, so that was my fault. But we had to pull it all back out and repin the harness 100%, meaning every single pin on the harness was wrong. So we went ahead and did that. Now we're back in business and we can fit this thing in, hopefully. Alright, so everything's put back together. As we said, it's time to tune it now. I'm gonna head to the trunk. He's got the disc in the player. We're gonna start playing some tonage. First thing we need to do is find out where this radio distorts. To do that, we're gonna use the SMD DD1, so join me in the trunk, will you? Now, we're gonna go ahead and unplug our amplifier inputs here so that nothing is hooked up to them. The first thing we wanna do is test our radio output. So we're gonna go over to our block here and plug in. All right, we're on. We're detecting signal. Go ahead and turn it up one for me. One more. Oh, there's distortion. Turn it down one. All right, what number is that? All right, so we're getting distortion at 22 on the volume knob. So we know that's where the output of the radio. We'll go ahead and try it at 40 hertz now. Go ahead, let's try 40 hertz, 0 dB. All right, so we have signal. We still at that 22? All right, let's see what it'll go up to. You're good. You're good. Still good. All right, we have distortion. So 25. So 25 at 40 hertz. So we have 22, we have 25. So we're gonna just call this 23. We're gonna split it in the middle. Say 23 is where this radio pretty much dies out at. So now what we wanna do is we're gonna move on to the amplifiers. So we'll go ahead and we'll plug in our signal into these guys here. Now when these amplifiers power up, they go ahead and flash red, and then they turn green. Clip onto our ground and we'll come over here. Let's go ahead and set it for -5 at 1000 hertz. All right, so we're good there. Let's go ahead and do -10, 40 hertz. All right, so -10 is giving us a light on the amplifier. So we're actually going to trust the amplifier and go ahead and turn it down until the light on the amp goes off. All right, so that's probably at like -8 on the amplifier. So we have them set up about where we want them for volume. We're gonna go ahead and drop the subwoofer in here, and then we're gonna listen to it. Sound like a plan? Now we're gonna start with the crossovers like we had them at 80 hertz. Now for a sub, we just went next door and grabbed something real quick to throw in there. So what I grabbed was a Scar Audio 112 down firing box. All right, so the Scar woofer is all hooked up. So remember, 23 is where this maxes out for the most part. I grabbed the wrong subwoofer enclosure. The Scar box was a 4 ohm. The amplifier is 2 ohm rated. We were getting no power out of it at all. Really disappointing. So we ran to the store real quick, grabbed the 2 ohm box, threw that in the trunk. Now let's give it a listen. Alright, so that's it. This was a definite improvement. So, the reason for these amplifiers are, in this case, if you have, let's say, a factory radio or an aftermarket, doesn't matter, and you want to add some more sound to the car.
Yes.
In this case, we wanted to make sure we had a factory radio. We wanted to use that high level feature. We wanted to boost those speakers. Sometimes that's what the customer or you, the customer, wants. You just want to make those front or rear speakers a little bit louder, you know, sound a little bit nicer, or have the ability, like we did, put some new speakers in here, like the Phoenix Gold that we put in here, and make them sound better than the crappy radio. And they do. They sound a lot better.
Way better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adding the subwoofer was just the icing on the cake. Admittedly, we didn't put a lot of effort into the sub. We just grabbed some random box next door, threw it into the car, and we wanted bass. We wanted to hear what it sounded like with bass. So now in this, we have a set of 6.5 components up front, a subwoofer in the back. We're gonna rock this, and by we're, I mean Fernando. He's gonna beat the hell out of these amplifiers for the next couple weeks until we get around to filming the next one of these. So I'm sure you guys will have some questions as far as, you know, in other videos you guys like to ask and see how we're doing with things, and we'll let you know. But we wanna play with them, so don't ask how they're doing yet, because we need to have a couple days, so, or a couple weeks. Let it, you know, let the Florida sun bake these bad boys. Now, we'd like to thank AudioControls for sending these amplifiers and getting the Car Audio Lab rolling. They were a big encouragement to get this segment going. And also like to thank Phoenix Gold, Artie, for sending us these speakers to put in here. We had mentioned that previously. So Car Audio Lab is in full motion now. We're in full effect. The car is all set up in the back. We can pretty much test anything. Now, as far as the factory radio goes, right now we're keeping it. That's not to say we're gonna keep it forever, because there's some other tests we want to do. There's some DSPs that we want to try that have Bluetooth connectivity to them. We won't even have to use the factory radio. We can just Bluetooth directly into a DSP in the back and bypass this crappy deck. We'll see. Only time will tell what Car Lab will put out.
And you will see.
Yeah. Either way, it's gonna be fun, because the more fun we get to have, the more fun you guys get watching these cool videos we make.
There you go.
All right. That's it for tonight, guys. Thank you so much. Thank AudioControl again.
On to the next one.
Bingo. See ya.